Hey everybody, GZERO is here at the World Bank IMF annual meetings, and we're about to talk about the Trump factor and what it might mean for both the US economy and the global economy. I'm here with my colleague Rob Kahn, who is Managing Director for Economics and Markets. The IMF has made it clear that actually the United States is a bright spot right now in terms of growth globally, yet if you ask people here in America, you're going to get very different answers about how the US economy is actually doing. How is it doing, and why do people feel so differently about it?
Well, I can talk about the data, and I will, but I will also have to acknowledge that this is one of the most divisive issues in the US political debate. So let's start with the data. Despite a rapid rise in interest rates by the Fed, headwinds from geopolitical shocks, and other elements of the post-pandemic adjustment and the supply chain disruptions that came with that, the US economy has proved impressively resilient over the last several years. And the American consumer continues to buy. Not everybody is doing as well or well. Some have been hard hit by those higher rates, by diminishing savings, and by a softening labor market. But overall, the US economy has done very well, supported also by some significant fiscal stimulus in past years, including the IRA. And so I would say, if you asked about fundamentally the US economy is sound and seeing stable, actually above trend growth, an unemployment rate that is still quite low by historical standards, and inflation that has come down quite dramatically in the last year. So that's the good news. But at the same time, if you look at measures of how people feel about it, you see people still feel very insecure. And there is a sense that the economy is not doing well. Maybe not for their own personal circumstance, but independent of that, at a national level, we're not heading in the right direction. And that has become a central factor in our presidential debate. Vice President Harris, while she has closed the gap on that issue, still trails former President Trump on the polling over who will better handle the economy for us. And I think that we look at that as a potentially an important factor in what will be a very close election.
You know, when you speak about inflation, it is coming down, and that's actually true globally as well, right? But both the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign have used inflation.
Yes.
And really pocketbook issues like the grocery store, they're just blaming different people for the reason why eggs cost more today than they did. But if it is in fact coming down, why don't more people just see that inherently on their shelves?
So I'll give you a couple of reasons for that. I think part of this is the polarization of the American political debate. You know, we are a closely divided country, and I think we're getting our news from different sources. And I do think to some extent, how you see this data, how you feel about it depends a little bit on your alignment, political alignment, right? But a second factor, is that people still feel insecure from the shocks of several years ago. And to make an economics point, it may be that it is the price level rather than inflation. The inflation rate on basic goods like eggs and toilet paper and the commodities you need every day, the inflation rate on those has come down. But the prices are still quite a bit higher, and people still feel the pain from that. We actually did some work at a global level, and we found that when there is a significant price shock, so inflation that persists in countries around the world of very different characteristics, there is a lasting effect on people's sense of security. Governments are more likely to fall. People are more likely to feel unhappy with the policies in place. And I think there's a certain element of that going on in the US that is a legacy of the pandemic, and that Vice President Harris is just really struggling to overcome, even though the underlying data has improved a lot.
Interest rates, another key topic on the campaign trail. And in fact, former President Trump has accused the Fed, the Federal Reserve, of playing politics with interest rates by slashing them too close to the election. How does the Fed actually work, and how do they arrive at those interest rates?
Politics is always in the air. Obviously, that's the reality for all of us. But the Fed tries very hard to insulate its decision-making from the political debates. I really feel quite strongly that they have been for some time aimed at trying to get inflation back down to their target level of around 2%, sustaining the recovery, that their legacy is aimed around their success in doing that. They knew this was an incredibly difficult time given the shocks of the last 4 years. So I think they do try and insulate from that, and they believe very strongly they are not responding to politics. I actually think Jay Powell probably wanted to cut rates beginning in July. He didn't have a consensus at the board, it looked like. And so in some sense, that recent cut of 50 basis points represented a bit of a catch-up and to put them back on track. I think it's probably about right, but they must have understood that to do it close to the election would be seen as political and would draw rebuke, particularly from the Republican side, just as policy changes after the election will be criticized from the other side. I think the bottom line is that the previous tightening has worked. The economy is in a pretty good place, but now, because inflation has come down, rates are high, they are restrictive. And so the Fed is right to be gradually lowering rates. They're not sure how much to lower, they're not sure how fast. So they probably will do it kind of gradually, watching how the economy is responding. And I think that will, for now, calm the criticism a bit, and will probably lead to rates that are probably about a full percentage point lower by the middle of next year than they are now, at least.
And former President Trump has also insinuated that the president should have a say in where interest rates go and maybe offer guidance. Is there any precedent for that, first of all, and what impact could that have on global currencies if in fact it happened?
A lot. So it's important to start from the historical point that the idea of presidents pressuring the Fed for policies that they want has a long history. There's even a famous story of Lyndon Johnson pushing a Fed chair up against the wall after losing his temper with them. And there are also famous stories, Republicans and Democrats putting pressure on. For the most part, the Fed has seen resisting that as central, that kind of overt pressure as central to its independence, which is so important for its credibility and for achieving markets. So the idea of pressure from the president, not new. Now, Donald Trump always does things in new and interesting ways, and it feels different. It feels more disruptive, right? More volatile. And I have no doubt that if he, as president-elect and president, starts to put a lot of pressure on Jay Powell, talks openly about maybe trying to fire him and the like, that would create a lot of market volatility and a lot of uncertainty. I think the best thing for him to do is to make his views known, to be heard, but to allow the Fed to do its job. They'll actually be cutting rates, which he should appreciate, although they may not be doing it as fast as he wants, and focus on the fact that Jay Powell's term as the chair expires in May of 2026. And so it will not be too long till a president-elect, or President Trump would have the opportunity to appoint a successor. And probably the most important decision he will have to make from a market perspective in the next year and a half or so will be on that successor.
Rob Kahn, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Tony.